We are back from recess. This is still technically the joint committee of the Senate and Assembly Judiciaries, and right now we only have the senators here because we are going to enter a work session on SB 452. We have created and provided a work session document. It is available on Nellis. I believe it has been emailed to Senator Pickard, who is joining us by phone today. It is also provided on the desks of all of the senators who are here in the room. And I will have Mr. Guinan walk us through it, please.
Thanks, Chair. Excuse me, Patrick Guinan for the record, Community Policy Analyst. So, as the Chair just mentioned, we are going to do a work session on Senate Bill 452, which we heard here in this committee this morning, sponsored by the Majority Leader. This bill prohibits the possession of a firearm on a covered premises in certain circumstances. I won't read the summary of the bills as we just heard it. The conceptual amendment that is proposed by this committee amends the proposed amendment that Senator Donate offered earlier this morning at the hearing, and the amendment would do the following. It would require information relating to an establishment's firearm policies to be provided on the establishment's website. It would provide that when a law enforcement officer arrives in response to a call from an establishment, before making an arrest, the officer must identify himself or herself and provide the person an opportunity to comply with the establishment's policy. Would narrow the definition of premises to exclude adjacent properties that are owned by the licensee. It would revise language regarding law enforcement officer exception, to mirror that contained in statute governing firearms on school property. And it would require signs provided for in the bill to contain a citation to the controlling chapter of the Nevada revised statutes. That's all I have, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Guinan. And I think all of these reflect amendments that were proposed and discussed during the hearing. But are there any questions? Is that okay? I don't see any questions. I would accept a motion to amend and do pass with both the amendment provided at the hearing and the additional conceptual amendments reflected in the work session document. All right, we have a motion from Senator Harris. We have a second from Senator Orenshaw. Discussion on the motion. Senator Settlemyre.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. There was a lot of questions that came out during the debate. I understand that the concept of this newest amendment is compromised on those particular aspects, but I think that the testimony clearly showed the fatal flaws of this bill, and that would be an understatement. The question to me is, though, we have a lot of ones that are still out there that haven't been answered that we asked of the MGM Properties, who are the primary person who brought this bill, and we haven't got those answers back. So at this point in time, I will definitely be opposing this bill. Yeah, I don't know, to bring back a bill that failed in one house and then just reintroduce it in the other house. We have so many issues out there that we could have discussed today, death penalty included. I just have a problem with it. Thank you.
Senator Hansen.
Madam Chair.
I'll go to Senator Hansen first and then Senator Pickard.
Very good. Thank you. I want to ditto to what my colleague just said. I'm really disturbed, frankly, not just about the bill, but the process, having an emergency bill at the last minute on a bill that had already been vetted by our colleagues in the other house. I think it was a real slap in the face. And I don't think it's the right way to handle things, especially when we do want to have some level of both bipartisanship and some level of camaraderie between the two houses. So I thought that was a big mistake. Also, it just seems to me, we had a ton of bills dealing with racial issues, and here it is perfectly clear that all the people in the Assembly, at least, are very concerned about that aspect of this bill, but then for some reason that level of concern is being dismissed in this particular bill. And we're going to end up ramrodding this through the Senate in spite of their very, I think, sincere concerns about that bill. And I thought that some of the testimony today, the absence of the ability to answer the questions, basic questions about the mechanical aspects of how this would actually be applied, was painfully obvious throughout the hearing. In my opinion, from the beginning when I said it, I thought this bill was all about optics and all about making a terrible situation that was horribly handled by MGM look good now, as if there was an absence in the law that caused the October 2017 shooting, when in fact what it was the MGM's own security people just flat dropped the ball horribly and allowed, I believe it was 15 long guns to actually be transported for apparently over a period of several days, and thousands of rounds of ammunition, and now coming back and saying, well, we we need a change in the law to prevent things like that. I'm sorry. All those other casinos have been doing a marvelous job of making sure that Vegas stays safe and that people feel safe coming there. And I thought that that aspect of this thing was really painfully disingenuous, and that was evidenced strongly by the absence of answers to fundamental mechanical ways of how this law would actually be applied. So thank you, Madam Chair, for letting me vent. I'll be a strong no on this bill.
All right, Senator Hansen. Senator Pickard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first impulse after hurrying through this bill that we just got a couple of days ago was to think that resorts, particularly MGM, are certainly entitled to protect their space. I also recognized after going through it that the law gives MGM and the others the authority to exclude firearms today. Ms. Molino admitted that to be the case. She also testified that Metro does not respond to these sorts of cases, but Metro, I think, reasonably rebutted that testimony and testified that they respond to over 80% of those calls and were called off for most of the others. What I think I found most disturbing was the effort to obfuscate and avoid direct answers to direct questions. Asked and unanswered seemed to be the rule. There was zero testimony demonstrating how this bill will change the practical reality on the ground. The resorts had no support from the rest of the gaming enterprises, or at least they haven't spoken up in support. I've heard from many who actually are opposed but remain quiet so as not to rock the boat at the association. But this all works to make me think that this is about one entity trying to burnish their image and to make Metro become their private security force, as one of the witnesses later testified. As much as I agree that they need to have better security, they need to be better by simply hiring armed security or better security, since Metro would be, at best, minutes away, maybe half an hour away. Ultimately, I'm most concerned about the reality of the disparate treatment that this bill is going to create. We have, as a society, as Senator Hansen just mentioned, questioned our most highly trained and responsible law enforcement individuals and their ability to police without bias. Arguably, the security force that will be required to enforce this policy before Metro shows up will not be as well trained or organized. And it's impossible to avoid the question of disparate treatment and profiling that is likely to occur, given it is so ingrained in our media and entertainment today. So I join in the calls from the ACLU and the others to avoid the disaster that is sure to be the real outcome of this bill. And let's find a more reasonably and constitutionally permissible way of accomplishing the goal, which I think is a worthy goal, of keeping our public places, especially concentrated areas like casinos and the like, safe. And again, I sympathize with the intent of the bill. We kept coming back, even though we weren't getting the answers to our questions. We kept hearing about the goal of the bill, and I agree with the goal. I think everybody agrees with the goal that we want to make these places safe. But I think rushing a bill through without the ability to really vet this thing, without the ability to get our questions answered, even in follow-up, means that, a hurried decision is always a questionable one. So I think that because this was brought so late in the session, we're not able to really vet this. We're not able to quell the fears of, frankly, I think it was the ACLU, Mr. Hasibullah mentioned, that it's unusual to think that the groups that were aligned against this bill would ever come together on the same side of a bill. I think that's testimony enough that this hasn't been well thought through. There are other alternatives short of what I believe to be constitutionally impermissible language. And so I will be a no on this bill as well. Thank you.
All right. Any other discussion? Senator Orenshaw.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I want to thank Majority Leader Canizaro and the other proponents for the additional amendments, Senator Doñate, Senator Harris, that have been proposed here. They do address some of the concerns that I had, and I hope some of the concerns of some of the other Assembly people and state senators who had questions. And So I do appreciate them trying to address that. I'm cognizant of the concerns that were brought up by ACLU and progressive leadership. I'm going to vote to support the measure and reserve my right. But I appreciate all the hard work of the Majority Leader and the proponents.
Thank you. Senator Harris?
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. I didn't want to be left out. So I know most people know I was not a fan of this bill as originally introduced, and I think it's come a very long way, and I'd like to echo my colleagues' comments and thanking the Majority Leader for listening to folks' concerns. And with this amendment and the new proposed amendment in the work session, I feel comfortable voting on that measure today. As well as the commitments from the Culinary Union and others to be on the lookout for any bias that may manifest itself. I find this to be a much better solution to what is a very real problem of gun violence on the Strip. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll take a point of personal privilege to indicate that I will also be supporting this measure out of committee because I do believe that it accomplishes the goals that were set out by the sponsor of this bill and the sponsor of the bill that it was originally contained in, AB 286. Assemblywoman Howdegi was here testifying in support of the bill. So I think that this represents actually the proper functioning of our system where we were unable to reach to address all of the concerns when AB 286 was in the Assembly. And so, sure, this was removed from that bill, but it came back in a very different form. The bill that you see in front of you today, SB 452, is different from the provisions that were originally in AB 286. This allows us to treat a certain premise that opts in to prohibit guns on their property the same way that we treat a school or a library or a public building, which makes sense because, as we've all noticed, the tourism economy is the lifeblood of our Nevada economy. And so we should be paying special attention to the resorts and the casinos and the hotels and all of the places that people come from all over the world to see and ensure that they can be safe while they are there. And we should be able to allow those facilities to have this increased and improved amount of safety on their properties. I also think that this hearing was largely focused on issues that were not relevant to the bill. It was very clear to me that we had moved away from the legal understanding of the Fourth Amendment and of search and seizure law because none of that is changed by this bill. This does not change the amount of reasonable suspicion or probable cause that an officer has to have in order to stop somebody. And in fact, this will actually, in some cases, increase the level of scrutiny where you have police officers interacting with people on a casino floor instead of civilian security guards. And so this bill does not fundamentally change the right that anybody has to carry a firearm, just like they would on a school property or anywhere else that is prohibited. I think it is an important public safety measure that the new bill or the amended version of the bill reflects those necessary changes, and I am happy to support it out of committee. Seeing no further discussion, we will go to a roll call vote, please.
Vice Chair Cannizzaro?
Yes.
Senator Orenshaw?
Yes, and reserving my right.
Senator Harris?
Yes.
Senator Settlemyre? Senator Hansen?
No.
Senator Pickard?
No.
Chair Scheibel?
Yes, and with that, the motion passes. I will assign the floor statement to Senator Cannizzaro. And that concludes our work session for today. This is still a Judiciary Committee meeting, so we do still have public comment on the agenda. I don't see anybody in the room to give public comment. Broadcast, if we could just check and see whether anybody is on the phone to give public comment, please.
Thank you so much, Chair Scheibel. To provide public comment this afternoon, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, if you'd like to provide public comment at this time, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 490. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. You may begin.
Cyrus Hojati, Cyrus Hojjaty. I just want to thank you guys all about this opportunity. And I just want to point out that I believe that violence in general is going to be my concern because, excuse me, I'm sorry, there's a lot of outside noise. Okay. Yeah, I believe violence is going to be a serious concern because there is an epidemic of loneliness that is out of control because of this pandemic. I think loneliness can lead to violence. And it was really interesting to see how, what I've been hearing is on both sides, for and against, people were making claims that one side was going to benefit minorities, the other side was not going to benefit. And I really saw people's true colors. Culinary Union was for it. Other organizations that were for minorities were against it. It was just very interesting. So this bill really revealed a lot of true colors. But other than that, thank you guys so much, and I wish you guys all a good weekend.
Thank you, caller. And with that, Chair, there are no more callers to provide public comment at this time.
All right, then. That brings us to the conclusion of our meeting. I believe we have posted an agenda for Monday's meeting, which is scheduled to begin at 1 p.m. I'm just checking before I close us out. Yep, I will see you all on Monday at 1 p.m. Have a great rest of your weekend. We are adjourned.